Alright, so at this point it's becoming to look like actually a carburetor and not just a body and a bunch of miscellaneous parts. So we're going to go through the float and jet assembly now, and some of our new parts and pieces here. This is a one-piece needle and seat that came with my kit, which is much better as opposed to the old factory two-piece where this top clip could fall off and then you just flood your engine out and you could burn your car down. So these one pieces are a nice add-on. Also, some pieces I like to use is, now this is a plastic float. Now I prefer these plastic floats over these brass floats because they resist higher fuel pressures a lot better, and do a lot better in varying fuel pressures, where the brass float, though much more durable, it's heavier, so it doesn't resist as much pressures. It doesn't have as much counterbalance. So that's something to factor in when you're, going about your carburetor rebuild. So something else I want to mention in comparison from a 4-barrel to a 2-barrel, and why a 4-barrel is actually a more efficient carburetor, contrary to popular belief, than a 2-barrel. So as you see here, these are our primary jets off of our 4100 here, and they're a number 49 jet. Now, unless you get into the secondaries, you're cruising off of these jets and you're getting good manifold vacuum and good signal through your smaller boosters here, so you're going to get a lot better gas mileage with that, as opposed to this is your standard small block 2-barrel. And if I can read our jet size here, it looks like 56. So 49 versus 56, that's quite a difference when you're cruising down the road. A 2-barrel, and you can just see the difference in orifice sizes there. It's a lot larger. With a 2-barrel, you're cruising down the road, and those 2 barrels have to account for all the way from idle to, your red line, whereas a 4-barrel carburetor, you can cruise around on your smaller primary system, and then when you need it, you can get into your secondary. So all around, a 4-barrel carburetor is always the way to go, and these 4100s were just what you needed back in the 60s. So moving on through, we have some little parts and pieces, and we're going to get our float and jet assembly put in here. So you have these little brass pieces, hopefully you still do, and they're pretty simple. They just simply slide in here, and they just equalize some of your fuel. Now the next item I'd like to put in is our jets. Now you don't ever want to be pushing on your carburetor, pushing on your throttle linkage, so for our roller engine we're building, we'll just go ahead and use our box here, and that creates a good support on the carb base where we're not pushing on the throttle linkage. So now we can go ahead and install our jets. Now you should have 4 jets if you have a 4100, and your smaller jets are going to go on your primary side, and your larger jets are going to go on your secondary side, and they should be numbered. And if not, you should be able to visually tell a difference between the orifice sizes. So in my right hand here, I'm holding a primary, and then in my left hand, I'm holding a secondary. So you can see that the orifice sizing is quite a bit larger if you can't tell. So anyway, again, your primary is your side on your accelerator pump. So we're going to go ahead and put those in. And I like to use there's special jet screwdrivers, but I specially ground this screwdriver so it fits the contours of a jet just perfect, and it's not going to slip out and gall our jet up. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to get these turned into the body of our 4100. And again, they don't need to be gorilla tight. You don't want to pull threads out, and you don't want to crack your carb body. Just good and snug where they're not going to vibrate loose. So we'll go ahead and get those installed. Alright, so there we have our jets in. Now we're going to go ahead and install our one-piece needle and seat assembly, and there's a little gasket. It comes with your kit that goes on there. And again, you want to be careful with those gaskets so you don't get them pinched. And it's a little bit more tricky to get in, but you want to get it started with your fingers and then go ahead and use a ratchet to take them the rest of the way. So in this case, this is a 3/8 and it's a 12 point, so it can fit in between, in between the body there. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and install our float assemblies. As you see here, you have these rods with these clips, and they're biased by side so that you make sure that your little tang in the back here is lined up with your needle. So they're pretty simple, as you see here. They just slide in. Now this tang needs to clip over the back. There's a little notch on that seat assembly, just like this one here. So I'm going to have to take our screwdriver here and just work it back and over that seat. You want to be real careful not to damage anything, so just be patient and eventually it'll snap on over. Just like so. So that makes it so your float isn't going to come flying out and your float rod isn't going to be moving all over. So as far as that goes, it's pretty simple. You just want to be patient and don't try and ram jam it, and you won't damage anything. Real nice and easy, just like that, and at that point your floats are good and installed. Okay, so once you have your floats in, you're going to want to go ahead and set your float height. So every rebuild kit comes with a specification and a little piece of measuring tape here, or a measuring stick, to set your float height by. And how you do this is you measure from the top of the body with the gasket off down to the float surface. Now, there's a few caveats with this and some problems I personally have with this. Different floats have different distances from, the top of the float to, that pivoting rod. So these measurements really aren't going to be too accurate with these different floats. But what I've noticed across all the floats when I've done these carburetors, they all come out to just about level with the body, if not a little, sloped down. So, level, or they're tilted ever so slightly. So what I went ahead and did is, on this carburetor, I set them level. And we'll see how that runs, which is pretty close to my specification. It's always different. Every carburetor has a different specification. But when you get done, they always seem like they're darn near level, if not just a tad tilted down. So we'll go ahead and, like I said, start with this. So at this point, we're getting on to the end of our carburetor build. So we're going to take our carburetor top gasket here and lay it on. In a lot of cases when I've got these, they're a little bent up, so I tried to lay a bunch of books on top of this for about a day, and it straightened it out good enough where I don't think we're going to have any problems. But that's something to keep in mind. It makes it a lot easier. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and slide this rod into our choke assembly and dropping the base of our carburetor down and lining up our holes. Go ahead and take our 8 screws and we'll get this top tightened down. So as always, you want to get all of the screws at least somewhat started before you go ahead and fully tighten any of them down. So we've successfully done that here, and everything seems to be going together very well. Alright, and finally we want to get our little clip here on our choke assembly so our rod doesn't fall out. And the only thing we have left here is this little piece that is part of the intricate Autolite idle circuit, excuse me. So we just simply have our gasket and our two screws, and we'll get that ran in. It's located here right on the back side of the choke horn. Alright, so our final little bit of our carb rebuild here is our idle mix screws. Now I've already installed these, but before I installed them I took some steel wool and rubbed any of the corrosion off, and I put a very light coat of grease on them and turned them back in here. Now when you're setting your mix screws, you want those to be at equal adjustment. Now on some of these springs get in the way and kind of cause some issues, and all the porting's the same and these mix screws are the same size, so I went ahead and I used my my float measurement tool here, and I went ahead and measured them out so they were exactly the same length turned out and the exact same rotation. So from that point we'll have a good baseline. So what I assume I set them to when I turned them out is 2.5 turns, so that'll give us a good starting point when we go to run our engine. So I got this little brass fitting for our 3/8 line, and it's a flange fitting, so it doesn't need any seal or anything. So we'll tighten this down and take our 4100 here and go give it a shot on our 289 engine. Well, the first things first with getting this 4100 tested out is I need to fire up the old F100. Alright, so we got our Autolite 4100 on here, and I turned the engine over for about 20 seconds, so it should be good and primed up. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I don't see any leaks. Running no choke here as the engine was warm from our previous run, so I'm going to kick it over and see how she does. Give her some throttle here. You can tell she's cold. She's holding an idle. I got the idle mix screw set pretty high here, so pretty forgiving setting at the moment. Can't argue with that. Truth will come out here when it's under a load, what she does. Here we go. Alright, that's pretty much it. 4100 carburetor runs real good. So I think it's ready to go back on old Chad's 66 Galaxy. Should be good to go. So that's a wrap.